Welcome to another episode of the Most Serious Podcast. And today I've got Mr. Yash Tiwari with me, a well acclaimed public speaker. He's given TEDx talks, he's given Josh talks. And I actually was viewing your Josh talks recently. And one quick observation for the audience and whoever hasn't listened to that talk, that he has a signature style of expressing himself. I think you have developed a way on in which how you communicate or how you just speak publicly. I want to start from there. Is that something that's now natural to you, or is that something you developed over time?
Very natural, because this is something I haven't ever deliberately thought about. I mean, I just keep one thing very clear whenever I communicate, whether it is for a formal talk or even for, let's say, a conversation that we are having right now.
Yeah.
Because I do not consider this to be a very formal setting. I
No,
am
please
talking,
don't.
we are just talking, right?
Yeah.
So for me, conversations always have to have a foundation of, how do I put this? Kindness, generosity. They need to feel warm. They need to
Yeah.
feel welcoming, because at times we think of motivational speaking or inspirational speaking as a very aggressive form of speaking, where the speaker has to somehow dominate the person that they're talking with. Now, for
Yeah.
me personally, communication has to come from a place of kindness and warmth, wherein when I speak, the listener should feel welcome. They should feel like they also want to be a part of that conversation, even if they are just listening to me for that matter, like let's say in a recorded talk. So, yes, that is a style, or that is just an essence, as I like to call it, which I wouldn't call per se deliberate or, even consciously depicted in my voice. Rather, it is something which I just try to have as much as possible. But even when I'm not trying, it is simply there. So that is how I would put it.
I can definitely see that. I think I can sense that, warmth in tone and just a welcoming nature in the way you address, in the way you communicate your thoughts and, whatever you want to say. But let's start there. Do you want to give introduction which you usually like to give whenever you are welcomed? Because I'm sure
Sure.
you would have things announced for you. But what do you like to associate yourself with?
Yeah, so I mean, a few things I always consider very much a part of my journey, and things that I'm very grateful for as well are certainly the following. The first one being the fact that I started writing when I was 16 years old. That is when I authored my debut novel, which was titled A Celebration Tribulation, which went on to receive a lot many awards and acclaims around the world, which I'm very humbled and grateful for. Then after that, I authored Pandemic 2020, which was one of the first fiction novels to ever be written on the coronavirus outbreak. And for that, I've set a few international records at the India Book of Records, the Asia Book of Records, amongst the others. Then very recently, I have actually authored my third fiction novel, which is titled Blisters of the Battle, which,
No.
as the name suggests, it is like a commentary, or rather a dramatic fictional tale on the geopolitical spectrum, on the implications of war, especially on the common
Hmm.
people. And it has went on to become an international bestseller as well on Amazon. And beyond that, I am also a filmmaker. I have recently produced my first feature film, which has been screened at a few film festivals internationally. And on the public speaking front, of course, I am an international motivational speaker and public speaker. I have delivered talks at TED and Josh, and it is always a delight to channel my voice and words to
Yeah.
create that positive impact in storytelling, in public speaking, in creative writing, in filmmaking, in whatever capacity is possible. Because I always believe in the innovation of voice and the innovation of storytelling itself
Hmm.
as a medium. And so that is how I view it in my endeavors as
Man, this is so interesting. I really just want to sit and decipher, how you
well.
came on from where and how did you get here. But
Yeah,
let's start somewhere.
sure.
How does one? So I think personally, in my experience, it's always a creative. I think there's some sort of creative inside everyone, and it's just about getting in tune with that, finding what craft is that creative inside of you good at, or just wants to do. And curiosity is a very good indicator of finding that. So I would want to know, how does that shift in you happens, which makes you decide or makes you realize that, okay, this is my creative side, this is something that I like doing, this is storytelling,
Mm,
writing books or just understanding filmmaking or things like those super
sure.
creative intensive arts. How do you get into that?
I mean, uh, from the get-go, there is this inkling in me. There always has been this inkling in me that I want to channel my voice. I want to
Hmm.
channel my voice.
Okay.
And then, of course, as I grow older and older, it transforms into something much more beautiful, wherein it is associated with this inspiration, this deep-rooted inspiration I have, that I want to channel my voice to create an impact. I want to utilize my words to create a far reaching positive impact. And when that inspiration is solidified in my heart, in my soul, in my mind, I think it is somehow very transformative for my projects as well. Because then, whenever I'm choosing that, okay, this is the story I want to tell next, I have this clear sort of a litmus test in my mind that how much will I be able to impact the audiences with this particular topic as opposed to that one. And so I
Hmm.
think this varies from topic to topic as well, from conversation to conversation, from talk to talk, from subject to subject, from theme to theme. Let's say when I'm deciding that okay, this is the book I want to write. I very clearly remember this was specifically during the time of writing pandemic 2020, or rather right before that. We had this Janta lockdown period, if you remember, the very
Yeah,
initial
yeah,
phase of the COVID-19, that
yeah,
we
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
told that it would be only for 22 days, as we
Yeah.
recall. And so that was the time when there was a lot of hubbub around the topic of COVID-19 itself. Not anybody was even clearly aware of it. There was a
Yeah.
lot of uncertainty around it.
Yeah.
But one thing was very certain, that on every single news platform, on every single radio platform, there were stories. There were,
Yeah.
actual accounts of people dealing with, or suffering from, or just fighting against this huge global villain called the COVID-19. And so
Yeah.
I, as an author, had a very clear inclination, but also inspiration in that moment, that I have a duty to write a story about this as a storyteller, to pay my homage to, of course, all the warriors and the sufferers of the COVID-19, but also to write a historical account of this particular period of the narrative, so that even, let's say, 1,000 years from now on,
Yeah.
when
I see your
there are
point.
readers who are reading it,
Hmm.
they are getting to know something. And so I think, like I was saying, just to sum it all up, there is always this inspiration behind all of my projects, behind all of my talks, that I want to create an impact. There has to be a reason for it. There has to be a very positive motivation behind it. And that is how it all culminates across the projects, and also at large throughout the journey as well.
I think I mostly agree with whatever you said, because I think it's one of the most crucial elements whenever you I think propose any proposition. And I feel like, writing a book or creating a movie is just a proposition with whatever your end consumers are. You are trading value, you are trading their time for some value that you are expecting, they are expecting you to provide. I think
Exactly.
they are waiting for you to take
Most
them on an
certainly. They
experience.
want to be entertained. They
Yeah.
definitely want to be entertained, but they need a good story for that.
Yes, exactly. So I think it really boils down to that, of bringing that value firsthand. But
Yeah.
I want to understand, how do you like what is your creative genius journey look like? So how does, even so, I've always wondered this, how do authors actually start writing books? So if I am, let's say, a person, and I've always wanted to write a book, maybe someday I will, but I want to understand, what is the first step if Rahul from Mumbai is listening to the show and wants to start his first book? How does he do that?
So I'll answer this question very quickly, but in two parts. The first part would be about my own starting
Yeah.
point when I started writing, because I always had this sort of a creative inclination, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, I started writing poetries and short stories at the age of 6 or 7, and my parents would
Oh.
get those uploaded on online blogs, and they were also featured in various media platforms from a very young age. And so, in that manner, I had an inclination towards it, but on a very specific note, on a professional note more so. I authored my first book when I was just finishing off with my 11th standard. So what happened was, we had this sort of, I mean, there still must be this holiday period between the 11th standard and 12th standard, when the boards class
Yeah.
starts. And so I was aware that once 12th standard starts, my focus would entirely be on my academics. And then, of course, I was nominated as the head boy of my school. So there was, of course, a lot of academic or school
Hmm.
related pressure on my mind, that this is what I will be focusing on for the next one year back then. So I had a clear idea कि ठीक है अभी 22 days का ये period है. I want to utilize it doing something very creatively. And just on that whim, I took the first step with the leap of faith. I started writing this sort of an outline of if I write a book, what would that be about? And little
Oh,
did I know
okay.
that that would go on to become the first fiction novel I would write. That too within the record time of just 21 to 22 days only, as it was featured on various media platforms. And since then I have been very passionate about the process of storytelling itself. And when I talk about the second part of the answer, as I said earlier, if anybody wants to write something someday, start with a very clear idea in your mind, or rather an answer for the question in your mind.
Hmm.
Why are you writing this particularly? I mean, writing itself is a very abstract question. Why are you writing? There can be so many interpretations for it.
Yeah.
But for the specific topics you do pick up, have some sort of a clear answer, even if it is something as simple as because I want to entertain the audiences. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, when stories have a lot of message and inspiration in them, it's wonderful, it's brilliant, it's very memorable. And even the stories which might not have, let's say, 50 something messages in them, but they are entertaining, and the entertainment itself is inspiring. How much entertainment can be packed, and hopefully positive entertainment, hopefully non-offensive entertainment, can be packed up within that 1 hours 30 minutes time, or within those 500 pages. That itself is a feat, that itself is
Yeah.
something which I consider inspiring. So
Hmm.
have an answer for that. What is it that makes this entertaining? What is it that makes this inspiring? And when there is an answer for that, start the outlining process. First have some sort of an outline, even if it is not a chapter by chapter, at least some basic idea of where the story begins, where it ends, what is the middle ground of it all, and then start writing. So I think that would be a good point to initiate the process at least.
Yeah, I think I think it's a good roadmap to start. And I am kind of again intrigued by what you did, which is started first outlining like first you started writing what your book should would look like.
Yeah.
I think that is something which people don't because I think laying a geographical map of what you essentially are trying to get at is a good way to just make sure you're navigating somewhere and not just anywhere, or else you're scribbling anything
I mean,
whichever you want.
I'm aware of authors. I look up to so many filmmakers and authors who do just the opposite, because they just
Hmm.
go into it head first, blindfolded, just with a basic idea and some
Oh,
characters in their mind, but they
okay.
also just wing it, right? However,
Hmm.
wherever the waves of water take them in terms of the story, they do that, and it works for them. And for me as well, in certain narratives now, as I'm getting more and more mature with the process of storytelling, I do try it every now and then. It does work out. So I'm not advocating which one is better. I'm just
Hmm.
saying that for somebody who is just starting out, or who is just willing to write something as a first timer, having that outline can feel like this Google map of sort, like this GPS navigation system. कि at least अगर कुछ नहीं समझ में आ रहा है, if you just stick on to that outline, for the very least, कुछ तो pages complete होंगे, कुछ तो story create होगी. So I think in that manner, it can be pretty beneficial, at least for the first timers.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's not this or that.
Yeah,
You can always have an amalgamation of both. But I want to
exactly.
know this from you because you've certainly given so many talks, and
Yeah,
you are a public speaker of sorts. I want to ask this that has there ever been an incident, because I think all goes to plan, those are the best ones, but those ones you remember are the ones in which you mishap, or face something unexpected, which I feel is such a possibility when it comes to public speaking, like facing a situation which is unexpected or you didn't prepare for. Something, maybe it's a heckler in the crowd, maybe it's just the mic not working well, or just something happened on that day. So how does a speaker and a professional public speaker effectively manage that? What goes inside your head, and how
yeah.
differently do you do it from a normal person?
In one of the TED talks I delivered, I remember very clearly. Uh, it was like around 70-80% mark, the electricity of the auditorium, it went out.
Okay.
It like literally went out, and we had a very packed auditorium. We had like thousands of people over there in front of me, along with very renowned personalities who were like the fellow speakers sitting in the front row. And the electricity went out. and the mic stopped working. But if anybody knows anything about an auditorium, when it is quiet, even a single person's voice can be quite audible. It is pretty much
Hmm.
audible. It echoes.
Yeah.
So even when there was no electricity and everybody was like flustered, especially the organizers, I kept speaking. And I know that in those moments, we were just having this buffer time before the generators start again. But we did have an audience in front of us, right? A huge, huge crowd in front of us. And so I was on stage. And for that duration, when the organizers were just trying to get it worked out as quickly as possible, I kept on interacting with the audience over there. I think it might have been related to the topic, or maybe something just funnily around
Mm.
the fact
Yeah,
that there
subject.
is no
Yeah.
electricity, apparently, whatever that might be. But I kept on interacting because I knew that as a public speaker, and I always say this, the script particularly is not the focus, the interaction is the focus. The conversation is the focus. Of course, when I'm delivering a TED talk or when I'm delivering a Josh talk, I know that it is a structured thing. It has a camera focused on me, which is recording a very specified time period and a very specified script for that matter, which is then going to be edited for the global audiences. But there are people in front of me, even if it is, let's say, the camera crew, or even if it is the production team, or
Yeah.
in events it is a huge audience, and I have a duty to have a sense of impact on them in the live setting as much on the audiences in the recording itself. So
Hmm.
in that manner, that interaction, that instantaneous interaction,
Yeah.
that impromptu conversation, that is what happened. And it wasn't a problem for me because I took a joy even in that. But certainly it was memorable for others over there.
How do you have you? But I think this is, again, such a confident way to approach this.
Yeah.
But I think what people struggle with most is in public speaking. I'm sure, like I think a very simple example of this could be schools. So if
Yes.
schools, you're giving, let's say, your teacher calls you up in front of your class and you have to speak something, and the kid gets nervous because he's fearing what some bullies might say, or what if someone might heckle or just call them something or clap or
Hmm.
something like that. How
Hmm.
does one start to foster that confidence of not like just having that belief or just having that voice that doesn't
Yeah.
stop because of that?
Certainly, certainly. I mean, I used to be that 15 years ago, or I think that is way too long because I'm not that old. But let's say 10 years ago, nearly 10 to 12 years ago, uh, I used to be that way, in which I was the introverted kid in the classroom. But then the moment I realized that, yes, I have to acknowledge how others feel. I mean, I was just recording a talk on this topic a few days ago, that we live in a very globalized world right now. This is something on a bit of a different tangent. We live in a globalized world. You cannot say that you do not think about any other person. You do not worry about any other person. ऐसा नहीं होता है यार. If you are
Hmm.
sitting amongst a few people and they are saying something, or they are looking at you in a certain way,
Yeah.
some perceptions are gonna be coming up in your mind. If you are having a sense of mind over here, you will have some sense of a psychological response. The problem arises when you start comparing what is more valuable, their opinion or your existence, their opinion or your opinion, their opinion or your views, their opinion or your words. And
Hmm.
so for me, now it is always a clarity, a crisp clarity of knowing that my voice is the most valuable. When I enter a room, I value every person's opinions and appreciations a lot, but I value my voice much more than all of that. And
Hmm.
my zeal, my enthusiasm to speak. When I enter a room, I want to speak. I want to have that conversation. I want to take the charge and lead the dialogue that is happening over there. And so enthusiasm plays a huge role. Number one, where to answer your question, one needs to be very enthusiastic about what they are doing, what they're speaking, so that that enthusiasm trumps the eyes of the bullies, trumps the opinions of the naysayers. Number two, the self worth needs to be acknowledged much more than the worth of others around you, which, by the way, simply means that you still are valuing others. I never advocate for the fact कि आप दूसरों के बारे में सोचिए ही मत. I
Yeah.
always say that have your own self worth at least slightly more valuable in comparison to how much you are valuing others. क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं
Definitely.
पे आपको दूसरे को भी respect करना पड़ेगा, तभी आप उनके साथ correspond कर पाएंगे. But at the same time, you need to be valuing yourself much more than that. So when these two things happen, you have a clarity about your self-worth and you have a sense of enthusiasm about what you
Yeah.
are doing and what you want to speak. I think it kind of trumps all the naysayers in the get-go itself.
Yeah, I think that's a solid one because I remember certainly, and also I think these things play a lot in your head rather than objective reality. So, in my experience, by hosting this podcast in general, I think this has made me, just more comfortable with
Yeah.
silences, just more comfortable and relaxed with, in case there is a disagreement or things like those. Like you learn to navigate those things. It's just a conversation happening. Sometimes we build that up so much in our heads that, okay, this now changes everyone's opinion of me. Or if you, let's say, fumble a word, then in your head, it's all alarms blazing and, it's you on the spotlight. But actually, it's not that serious. It's, nobody cares that much if that makes anyone's calm or confident. And I think that certainly helps me a lot. Like you have to realize your worth, and then you also have to realize that not everyone is as spotlight focused on your life as you are. Like you are only living that perspective because everyone has their lives as well. So maybe can you provide some value to them while they are attending to your time, and outside of that just not think about I think that's something which also makes people feel imposter. Do you think about that, like once they get so focused on what is everyone's opinion of me?
So, I mean, there are people who feel that way. I have listened to so many interviews, even of the people that I look up to so much, whether they are filmmakers or
Yeah.
speakers or writers, and I have heard of that sentiment. I definitely have heard of it. I have made note of it. I've tried to even research more about it. When I talk of my personal experiences, my personal psychology in instances like this, it would be that even when I know that, okay, the spotlight is on me, and this is just my individual take on it, or when I know that, let's say the audience is hyper focused on me,
Yeah.
I think that feels very energetic. For me
Hmm.
personally, that is a positive force. That is a very positive force. When I come on a stage and I know that the spotlight is on me, and every single person in the audience is going to be hyper fixated on even the minutest of steps I take. For me personally, that feels like a driving force, that feels like a positive force. And I think that is maybe because of how optimistically I look at all of that anyway. मुझसे बहुत ज्यादा पूछे जाते हैं कि स्टेज फ्राइट का क्या सीन रहता है और हैव आई एवर फेल्ट दैट सेंस ऑफ नर्वसनेस और एंजाइटी एंड there can be so many ways to interpret that nervousness and anxiety, but for me personally, the moment I enter on a stage, that anxiety automatically transforms into some sort of an excitement. Okay, the
Hmm.
spotlight is on me, and now I have the opportunity to impact everybody over here. I am going to be in the sight of everybody, and I have the opportunity to make an impact, to maybe, who knows, change somebody's perspective or help somebody with their own
Yeah.
psychological dilemmas or whatever that might be. So
Yeah.
I think it is like a game of perspective and a game of situation and a game of psychology itself. For me, that is the side I usually feel more inclined towards. But then again, I certainly respect what the opinion you have stated, and this is something which I have time and again observed in so many interviews I watch as well. So it definitely is like a shared point of view for many out there.
Yeah, so this reminds me of, your take on this reminds me of another conversation that I had on the show with
Yeah.
Mr. Joe Morrison. He's a very famous football presenter. So he covered, FIFA World Cups and Champions League finals. And he talked to me about how everyone wants the spotlight, but nobody wants the pressure. And
I like it. I kind of like it because for me, that pressure just becomes another driving force to make
yes,
my stories better.
exactly.
It basically helps me understand. Like, it's as simple as that. I'm delivering this talk right now, but my focus already is on the next big thing I want to do, or the next
Hmm.
big platform I want to be on, or when I'm writing a book right now. For me, that is a healthy mindset because it keeps me going. I am already thinking about five other topics I want to cover in the near future while respecting and focusing on
Hmm.
the project I have right in front of me. That has my utmost attention, but somewhere in the back of my mind, in a very soothing manner, there is a
Yeah,
voice
like
which is also
evolutionary shift.
informing
Yeah.
me. Yeah, there
Hmm.
is a voice which is informing me about five other topics which will evolve over time. Maybe even in the process of writing this particular script I'm working on right now, I already know what are the five other topics I also want to work on. So that is how it works out, in my personal experience, at least.
Yeah, again, reinstating his words were similar. So he was like, it's the same platform. Why is Virat Kohli able to perform so much better in pressure situations than other players? Why is he able to chase those, high pressure environments? Because
Yeah,
that pressure for him becomes another stage, which is another driving factor, because he knows, because he has that trust in them. And, similar thing with any person who's professionally implementing this, they use it as a driving force, and that's what separates them. I think that's what one of high performers indicators. Like,
yeah,
and also to your point, which you said, anxiety and excitement. I think it's nervousness and excitement. So Simon Sinek, I was hearing one of his talks, and he talks about it. Like, he says that how what are the physiological features, or what are the physiological effects of nervousness,
exactly.
and what are the physiological effects of excitement. It's just about
Exactly,
perspective.
exactly. It's about the adrenaline and where a person is letting that go. I even mentioned this in the masterclass I deliver, that this is a very biological process. I have been a biology student till class 12, so I know at least a bit about it. That when you are doing something a little bit out of the box, there is going to be a fight or flight response. Now, how you define that fight and flight is a whole different conversation altogether. But in that moment, let's say as a public speaker, the fight response would simply be aggressively approaching what feels a bit pressurizing or anxiety inducing and delivering a talk out of
Yeah.
excitement. And then, of course, there is the other side, which I try to not look at all. So it is simply that, which of course can be utilized as a point of view across many things, really, whether it is the process of choosing your favorite dress in a mall that you go to and purchasing it, or
Yeah.
having doubts about whether you should be going for the next one or the next one or the next one or the next one. And it's just that it's about how you are utilizing that simple biological physiological aspect, as you also mentioned, across
Hmm.
the big and small phases of life.
I want to know your take on how content is evolving as we move forward in time. You are certainly an author, so I'm sure you would have read a lot of books, and you are into writing books. So I think that's just testament to how think content was consumed for most of the time that we know it. Now it's shifting to videos. Now it's shifting to short form content. Now it's
Yeah,
reels and shorts and all of that. How does that make you feel, and what are your thoughts on where does this go from the here?
sure. So I want to talk about this from an example itself. A few days ago, I was watching this movie by Stanley Kubrick titled 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is like
Hmm.
one of the classics of cinema.
Yeah.
That is one movie which basically revolutionized science fiction cinema as we know it right now. But the science fiction cinema, or cinema itself that we know right now, is very different than that movie, or than how the movies were back then. And the reason is very simple. In that movie, there were shots, and I kid you not, 10 minutes in length, or at least 5 minutes in length. I'm literally not joking. You can check it out, where we are just focused on a character's expressions or the changing landscapes. Nothing is happening, nothing which is
Wow.
developing the plot, but it is simply the depiction of the developing scenery or the developing expressions of the actors, or the space opera which has basically been showcased in the movie. My point is attention span, not just from the audience's side, which was quite expected, but also
Yeah.
from the filmmaker and the storyteller side, wherein the filmmaker is confident enough to create
Hmm.
these elongated shots
Yeah.
where nothing prominently in regards to the plot is happening, but the story is blatant enough कि आप
Yeah.
expression से ही fascinate हुए जा रहे हैं. And of course
Hmm.
that was also because in that moment no science fiction movie to that scale had been created. So anyway, it was like an assured bargain that audiences को मजा तो आएगा ही देख के, they are going to be in the the auditorium seated to watch it all. But still, It takes guts to do something like that. And now, and by the way, I'm not comparing, I'm just trying to state the realities of that
Yeah.
time versus now as we look at stories. In every single movie, I think it is quite obvious. You must have also noticed it is sort of expected that in every second minute, not even the fifth minute or the 10th minute, every second minute, something will happen which will create a hook.
Yeah.
Every second or third minute, something has to happen which will create a hook. Every 5 seconds, the scene has to change. In
Cuts.
this
Yeah.
movie, 2001 A Space Odyssey only, I take this example because this is one of those movies which has impacted the cinema so much, but it is so different than how the cinema is right now. And I mean, the short list is what, 67, 68 scenes at total. Itne lambe lambe scenes over the
Wow.
course of 2 hours 30 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. But now think of a movie which only has 60 scenes,
Damn, that's
60
so
uses
crazy.
of camera.
That's so crazy.
We have like 1 minute of footage which has 60 scenes at times.
Yeah.
So in that manner, I think attention span is the clearest litmus test for the cinema of now, of the present moment. I use the term cinema in a very generic sense to encapsulate all forms of contents, because even reels can be a part of cinema, even books can be a part of cinema, everything can be a part of cinema, everything can be a part of literature, as long as we look at it all that way. And so in that manner now, not only for the audiences but even for the content creators, for the filmmakers, for the writers as well, the focus is on keeping that adrenaline up constantly. Like, it should all be like a constant thriller, even when it might be a romance, cozy narrative, which is to be read on an odd day with the rain. But it must have thrill in it. It is a prerequisite.
Yeah.
It is a
Yeah.
prerequisite, even with which, let's say, you will be creating a podcast. If you have 40 minutes, you have to pack every single one of those minutes with something of insight, even if it might be a casual conversation. So I think in that way, the attention span itself is changing a lot for storytellers and for story consumers. And I think that is how it is impacting across platforms and mediums.
I completely agree with you on this. Completely agree with you on this. And I feel like personally, also anecdotally, I've observed this in my experience of, whatever little time I've created some content. I feel there is a certain need on short video form platforms to provide those hooks and all. But I just feel whenever I personally, it's my preference is to, because I cherish those pauses. Because in a movie, when the scene is just zooming out of a desert land,
Yeah.
then it leaves the consumer with the idea of imagination of just a personal interpretation of what the story is unfolding. And I think
Yeah.
there's magic. That is what truly cinema is. That is what makes you sit. It's a meditative experience. So I think you as a filmmaker would definitely understand what I'm talking about.
And
And
I value that a lot. I value
yeah.
that so much. Those moments of meditation in between of a large scale story which might be told.
Yeah.
It just, it encapsulates the audience. That is how I at least feel about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so, because I personally feel once you get into that description and leave someone with that to sit on that and ponder and connect those dots in their personal life from that
Yeah.
story. I think that is a truly experience, that is an experience. That's not just viewing, or that's not just consuming.
Hmm.
Then you are kind of integrated with that story. I think
Exactly.
that certainly is a way that we're moving forward with this. But thank you so much, Yash, man. So many cool things we've discussed. Super amazing to talk to you. You're very warm. You're very easy to talk to. I think that's possibly one of the reasons why you get invited to so many platforms, and you are such a good speaker. But I hope the audience takes away, some form of advice, whatever you've distributed. But love the way you communicate. And I think, sure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks a lot. Certainly a delight.
Thank you so much.